Imagine this scene. Your team just completed sprint planning. Everyone feels good about the selected stories, but 2 days into the sprint, developers are stuck, requirements are unclear, and stakeholders are changing their priorities. Sound familiar? I've seen this pattern play out countless times across different companies and teams, and I've discovered that effective backlog grooming is one of the most underestimated yet valuable activities that can prevent this scenario. Whether you're a product manager, design lead, marketing lead, or engineering lead, mastering this process will dramatically improve your team's ability to deliver value consistently. It's not just another meeting. It's the foundation that makes everything else in your delivery process work. I once joined a team that had been working together for 8 months. On my first day, I watched their sprint planning session, and it was disastrous. The product people were frantically trying to define requirements and write tickets during the sprint planning meeting while engineers asked questions. Then, during every day of the sprint, the entire team spent most of their time on Zoom together, wrestling and refining requirements while simultaneously trying to build. It was a vicious cycle because all that time spent on Zoom meant they didn't have time to think, plan, and write before the next sprint. The results? Their value flow was effectively nil. They weren't meeting sprint commitments, were months behind schedule, and morale was collapsing. The missing piece? Effective backlog grooming. Studies confirm this isn't uncommon. Poorly defined requirements are responsible for 39% of project failures, and 75% of executives believe their projects are doomed from the start due to poor preparation. At its core, backlog grooming serves a simple purpose. It ensures that I, as the product lead, have defined the work well enough for engineering to deliver it. The engineer's role in grooming is first to tell me if the requirements aren't good enough, and second, to understand the requirements so thoroughly that they can explain them to other team members who will implement them. This creates a critical distinction between sprint planning and backlog grooming. Sprint planning is when engineers understand the work, commit to it, and plan execution. Backlog grooming is when engineering tells me, as the product leader, where I've failed to define things clearly or document them adequately. Without proper grooming, teams spend valuable sprint time figuring out what they should be building rather than building it. That's exactly what happened with the team I mentioned earlier. They were constantly in meetings trying to clarify requirements, which destroyed their productivity and morale. When I implemented proper backlog grooming for that team, it completely transformed their performance. They no longer needed all-day Zoom sessions. Engineers could focus on building rather than questioning. Productivity soared, and people actually started enjoying their work again. For backlog grooming to work, you can't just show up to a meeting and wing it. Preparation is essential. For a 2-week sprint, I typically spend about 6 hours preparing the backlog before the actual grooming meeting. Why so much time? Because this preparation is where the real value happens. I'm thinking deeply about the work, ensuring requirements are clearly defined, writing detailed acceptance criteria, and confirming that tickets meet our definition of ready. This preparation time pays enormous dividends. Research shows that for every hour spent in refinement, teams save 3 to 4 hours in subsequent development time. That's a 300 to 400% return on investment in terms of team productivity. Remember, backlog grooming is not just the 2-hour meeting. It's the meeting plus all the preparation work in advance to ensure the work is well considered and well defined. For the meeting itself, I typically schedule 2 hours for a 2-week sprint. Traditional Scrum guidance suggests 4 hours, but I've found 2 to be sufficient when you've done proper preparation. The success of backlog grooming hinges on one critical factor: getting honest feedback from your engineering team. This requires deliberately creating an environment where engineers feel comfortable telling you when requirements aren't clear or when there might be better approaches. When running the grooming session, I make it explicit to the engineering leads that the purpose is for them to tell me where I have failed to define the work properly. I frame it entirely as my responsibility by saying, the purpose of this grooming session is to tell me, as the product leader, where I have missed the mark. This framing is crucial because many engineers have been conditioned just to accept whatever tasks they're given, even when they see problems. They become what I call ticket takers, building whatever you tell them, even if they think it's a bad idea, because they've been criticized for questioning requirements in past roles. Research from Microsoft's developer experience teams found that engineers who felt comfortable raising concerns about requirements produced code with 60% fewer defects than those who didn't. Yet, in a 2022 survey of software engineers, 68% reported holding back technical concerns at least once a month due to fear of negative reactions. To coach engineers to provide better feedback, try these approaches. Respond positively to early attempts at feedback, even if they're awkwardly phrased. A simple, "That's a great point, thank you for bringing that up," can reinforce the behavior. Ask specific questions that invite critical thinking. What concerns do you have about implementing this approach? Or, is there a more efficient way to achieve this outcome? Share how engineering feedback has improved previous work. Remember when you suggested that alternative approach? That saved us weeks of work and performed better in testing. And explicitly encourage engineers to tell you where they technically could do something, but it's not a good idea, or where there might be better approaches. Another key factor in creating a productive environment is including the right people. I don't invite the entire engineering team to grooming sessions. That would waste their time. The only people who should attend are the product managers explaining the stories and the engineering leads who will mentor the other engineers. This keeps most engineers focused on building rather than sitting in meetings. And when an engineering lead says during grooming, "We can't do this ticket right now," or "This isn't defined well enough," I never force it into the sprint. That would defeat the whole purpose of grooming. Instead, I will move it back to draft status. I set up workflows in whatever tool we're using, Jira, Aha, Linear, etc., with distinct states that make it clear where each piece of work stands. Draft means I'm still writing this. Engineers don't need to look at it yet. Ready for grooming means this is prepared for review in the grooming session. Ready for sprint means it's been successfully groomed and can be considered during sprint planning, and to do means it's selected for the current sprint during sprint planning. This workflow does more than just organize work. It protects engineering time and focus. When engineers are constantly exposed to an overwhelming backlog of undefined work, it creates cognitive load and anxiety. You reduce that load significantly by showing them only what's relevant to their current responsibilities. Studies in cognitive psychology show that our working memory can only hold about 4 to 7 items at once. Every additional item competing for attention reduces performance. By carefully controlling what engineers need to focus on, you maximize their cognitive resources for solving complex problems rather than managing the work state. As you implement or improve your backlog grooming process, being aware of common pitfalls can save you significant pain. After observing hundreds of grooming sessions across different organizations, I've identified several recurring issues that undermine effectiveness. First is inadequate preparation. The meeting becomes inefficient and frustrating when product managers don't prepare tickets before the grooming session. The team wastes time discussing half-formed ideas rather than refining well-thought-out requirements. The impact? Longer, less productive meetings and poorly defined work entering the sprint. When work is poorly defined, developers make assumptions that may not align with users' needs, leading to rework and missed targets. The solution is to block dedicated time before grooming sessions to prepare stories, acceptance criteria, and supporting materials. The second is trying to groom too many items. Some teams attempt to review their entire backlog in each session, resulting in shallow discussions and missed details. This creates the illusion of readiness, while actually setting the team up for failure when they start working on the items. I typically groom about 2 sprints worth of items at a time, providing enough runway for planning while ensuring each item receives adequate attention. The third includes implementation discussions. Backlog grooming isn't the time for detailed technical discussions about how to build something. These discussions derail the session, exclude non-technical participants, and often happen without all the necessary technical team members present. Focus grooming on clarifying what needs to be built and why. Note technical concerns or questions, but schedule separate sessions for detailed implementation discussions with the right people. Finally, estimating during grooming. Some teams try to do detailed estimations during grooming sessions. This mixes 2 different cognitive processes, understanding requirements and estimating effort, making both less effective. It also usually happens without the whole team present, leading to inaccurate estimates. Use grooming to ensure requirements are clear enough that the full team can estimate them later during sprint planning. Avoiding these pitfalls makes grooming sessions more efficient and effective, directly impacting sprint success and team morale. Now, sometimes standard backlog grooming isn't sufficient for particularly complex or intricate initiatives. Let me share a recent example from my own work. We were planning a multi-month initiative that required a very narrow skill set. It was clear that having multiple developers switch contexts to work on this wouldn't be efficient, so we decided to have a single developer focus on it full-time with just 1 to 2 tickets per sprint dedicated to this work. For this situation, I scheduled a special backlog grooming session focused solely on this initiative. This special session was in addition to our regular 2-hour backlog grooming with the engineering leads. It meant that during that one sprint, we doubled our grooming time from 2 hours to 4, which was challenging to fit into everyone's schedules, but it was worth it. This special session included the dedicated developer, engineering leads, product, design, and marketing teams. We spent 2 hours getting everyone on the same page, answering questions, and ensuring all requirements were well defined across the entire initiative. Despite the time investment, this approach proved invaluable. The developer felt supported and had a clear vision of the whole initiative rather than just seeing it piecemeal. Other departments understood the timeline and scope, which helped them plan their dependent work. And I could confidently communicate progress to stakeholders because we had established such a solid foundation. We still took this work through regular sprint planning with the larger team, so they were aware of it and could help estimate it. But that special grooming session ensured the developer had everything needed to be successful over the coming months. Consider this approach of special, more inclusive grooming sessions for complex, long-running initiatives. The time investment up front prevents countless hours of confusion and rework later. The tools you use to manage backlog grooming can significantly impact its effectiveness. I primarily use Jira, but the principles apply to any project management tool. I build separate boards for different purposes: a backlog grooming board for lead engineers and me, a design board, since I run design teams a little separately, and a Scrum board for the actual sprint. Why this separation? It comes back to managing cognitive load. When people look at a board with hundreds of tickets in various states, it creates anxiety and makes focus difficult. By creating purpose-specific views, I help each group concentrate only on what's relevant to them at that moment. For example, when engineering leads look at the grooming board, they see only items I've prepared for review, not unrefined ideas or in-progress work. This makes their job more straightforward and manageable. For designers, who often work better in a more flow-based process, their board shows only design-related tasks without the engineering implementation details that don't concern them yet. However, I link design and engineering tickets if the designer wants to traverse and review the details. And for developers, their sprint board shows only what's been approved, estimated, and committed to, preventing the overwhelm that comes from seeing a massive backlog of potential future work. This approach is backed by research in cognitive psychology. Studies show that reducing visual clutter in work environments can increase productivity by 30% and reduce error rates. Digital clutter in our tools creates the same cognitive burden as physical clutter in our workspaces. By thoughtfully structuring your tools to match your process, you reduce cognitive load and help everyone focus on their current responsibilities rather than being distracted by what's not immediately relevant. Effective backlog grooming transforms how teams work together and deliver value. It's not just about better planning, it fundamentally changes the day-to-day experience of everyone on the team. Remember the team I mentioned at the beginning? After implementing proper backlog grooming processes, they no longer needed all-day Zoom sessions to figure out what they were building. Requirements were clear before work began. Engineers could focus on solving interesting problems rather than hunting for clarification. Their productivity increased, their morale improved, and they started meeting their commitments consistently. As you think about improving your backlog grooming process, keep these key principles in mind. Preparation before the session is as important as the session itself. Create psychological safety for engineers to point out gaps and issues. Only include the necessary people in grooming sessions. Use workflows and tools that protect focus and reduce cognitive load. And consider special approaches for complex, long-running initiatives. Effective backlog grooming isn't just a process improvement, it's a fundamental shift in how your team collaborates. When requirements are clear, trust is high, and focus is protected, teams don't just work faster, they do better work and enjoy it more. In our next module, we'll explore how to run effective sprint planning sessions that build on the foundation created by good backlog grooming. But for now, I encourage you to evaluate your current process and identify one improvement you can implement in your next session.